It's not a bear market in gold and silver. It's a manipulated bear market in paper prices in the United States principally. And around the world, gold is soaring, and pretty soon, silver will be soaring probably far faster than gold will.
Hey friends, welcome back. We have an exciting call here for you. We've got the one and only Andy Hoffman, the Media and Marketing Director for Miles Franklin, back on the line for a very important update. In fact, today we're going to talk about seminal events. Andy, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Good timing. Last time it was right around Black Monday, and today we have another day where a lot of real major stuff is hitting the fan at the same time.
Yeah, of course, September and October, always terrible times for the stock market. Everyone's expecting the next shoe to drop in terms of the global economic outlook and the global collapse. And I have one for you, Andy, being that we're talking to you today. There's no better place to start than Caterpillar. You've been telling us it's the canary in the coal mine for a very, very long time. And on Thursday, this headline, Caterpillar shocker, industrial bellwether to fire up to 10,000 people, slashes revenue outlook. There's just no better example of how unhealthy the global economy is, Andy, than what's going on with Caterpillar, correct?
That's right. In fact, Jim Cramer, of all people, earlier this year said, when it comes to the global economy, Caterpillar is my go-to name. What they say on their conference call basically pertains to the global economy. So he can say all he wants otherwise, pretend that he never said that. But the fact is, he did, and it's true. And in fact, Caterpillar has now had falling year-over-year revenues for 33 straight months, which is twice as much as it had during the 2008-2009 crisis. And as you said, they're laying off people left and right, cutting their outlook. In fact, in my article, the outlook for gold and silver mining in pictures, where I showed all the gold mining, silver mining stocks, in free fall, down on average 90%. These are the ones that are still around. And that, of course, goes for base metals as well. And then, of course, you have Glencore, which is the largest commodities trader in the world. It has $53 billion of debt, and it's about to go bankrupt as well. And when it does, it's gonna smash the commodity prices even further. So my point is that Caterpillar's outlook couldn't be worse. You have oversupply everywhere in the mining business, part of the Great Deformation that David Stockman has talked about, that I wrote about in my direst prediction of all article last year about how we're going to have oversupply in commodities for years to come. So yes, Caterpillar is telling us exactly where the future of production is going to be, but particularly for gold and silver, because while the base metal prices were supported for many years, causing oversupply, the gold and silver prices were held down for many years, which is why we have already reached peak production. In fact, I just wrote the day before how silver production is running down year on year by something like 8% globally. And next year, I think it's going to be catastrophic when you see how far these things, production starts to go down. So yes, the outlook for supply couldn't be worse for precious metals, while the outlook for demand couldn't be better.
Well, let's talk just a little further about this Caterpillar situation. Again, you've been covering Caterpillar as the benchmark for global economic health for a very long time. And the fact that they're doing so poorly, Andy, speaks directly to the fact that despite you being such a hardcore Keynesian, Andy, all this money printing's supposed to work. It's supposed to help. It's supposed to trickle down and make things better for everybody. And if Caterpillar can't make ends meet, that means nobody's buying this heavy equipment to do any industrial mining, to do any industry at all. Nobody's building anything. Globally, the economic situation is deteriorating at a rapid pace. I mean, explain to people how dire this is, Caterpillar being the canary in the coal mine.
Oh, it's all of them. I mean, you can look at John Deere, Caterpillar. You can look at I think I saw the trade routes going from east to west, from China over here. The prices on day rates have collapsed, and the numbers, the freight traffic, whether it's in China or the United States, is all falling sharply. I mean, look, even the rigged U.S. economic data has been plummeting everywhere. So it's not like this is a surprise, and it's not like Caterpillar is a surprise. There's just still this latent sense of propaganda out there that we have to somehow still believe and still brainwash ourselves into believing there's a recovery. But, it's all shot to hell right now. And in the Fed's announcement last week, not only of not raising rates, which I said they wouldn't because they can't. But, Janet Yellen, my audio blog the next day was "Zerp to infinity" from the horse's mouth. She basically said that it's a possibility that they can't get off of zero forever. And then you have one Fed governor predicting negative interest rates next year, meaning a negative Fed funds rate. So, of course, that's the way we're going to go. We're going there everywhere. And the scary thing is we're going there while all these currencies are collapsing. You see the Norwegian krona, the Norwegian central bank, they lowered interest rates to like next to zero. But the problem was it was already at a 15-year low, this currency. You don't lower interest rates when your currency is collapsing. That's how disjointed the central bankers have come. That's why we've reached the end of, as I wrote last week, the end of the belief that central bankers can save us, and more aptly, the beginning of the understanding they've destroyed us. So again, the central banks are dead. They can't do anything anymore. The fact that the Fed, for instance, unexpectedly didn't raise rates, and yet markets are crashing around the world, should show you that no one's listening anymore. And the next thing that they do could be the fatal one. I mean, when Janet Yellen announces QE4, which of course she's going to do, it could be fatal. It may not even get markets to go up at all. And even if it does, it won't be for a long time, because whether it's hyperinflationary or a crash like in 2008 style, in real terms, everyone is about to lose their shirt. And people have been losing their shirt for months. Currencies around the world, on average, are down probably 70% or more. The CRB commodity index barely touched a 40-year low last week, and it's on its way back down there now. I mean, this is some serious carnage going on around the world. And Caterpillar, as one of the largest industrial manufacturing companies in the world, is just another guidepost of exactly where we stand.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple of things there that I want to touch on as well before we move on to other seminal events. The currency carnage, right? The global FX heat map is a bloodbath, according to Zero Hedge. Let me read this to you. If it was Janet Yellen's intention when deciding not to hike rates to stop the surge of the USD against emerging market currencies in hopes of halting the relentless global capital outflows and the resulting quantitative tightening to avoid a new global currency crisis, she failed. But as you noted, Andy, she didn't decide not to hike rates. She cannot hike rates. They can't do it. There would be a total collapse in the United States because actually what they plan on doing probably is taking rates negative.
Yes.
Let's look for bail-ins coming soon to a bank near you, folks.
Yeah, I mean, I almost resent, that's articles from Zero Hedge. I almost resent even the snarky comments about how Janet Yellen is planning and plotting and thinking. She is not. It's more like they actually had something say inside Janet Yellen's head before the meeting, which was like, oh my God, I can't let this happen on my watch. What can I do? That's how she thinks. She looks at the markets. She says, oh, the markets are going down. I can't raise rates. She also looks at the debt and says, well, we have all this debt. We can't raise rates. Oh yeah, we have $4.5 trillion of debt of our own. Our assets of our own. The Fed, we can't raise rates. She knows they can't raise rates. She's not thinking or plotting one step ahead. She's just trying to get through the next day, just like the rest of these Keystone Cop central bankers. And as for what's going on in the currencies and the heat map, again, I don't know if anyone has been screaming this louder than me. You can go back to my December 2013, not December 14, December 2013, 2 years ago, my predictions for the year, when I said as the crisis gets worse, the dollar is going to surge against all of the currencies of the world, just like it did in 2008, because of a liquidity vacuum, not because there's anything great about the dollar. It's because when you have times of crisis, people want liquidity, which is why, by the way, we're running out of silver now, and our gold business is picking up dramatically as well. And you have around the world record gold and silver demand. So yes, the worse the crisis gets, it doesn't matter what the Fed does. The dollar is going to keep surging against all these currencies until they all crash one by one, and then it moves up the totem pole, and then it gets the yen and the euro and the pound, and eventually it gets the dollar. I mean, that's how things work in the world of liquidity. That's all that matters.
Yeah, well, then let's talk about this as well. I mean, everybody in this country, the people who aren't paying attention especially, think that there will never be a dollar crisis, right? They still believe that the dollar paradigm, Andy, is going to go on forever and that life will continue as it is today for another 10, 20, 30 endless decades, right?
When I first got into precious metals in 2002, we're talking 13 and a half years ago, I thought in terms of the dollar index. That's all, like the dollar is going to go down. But, years later now, I know it has nothing to do with, quote, the dollar. Yes, the Fed has been the reserve currency issuer, has caused more damage to the rest of the world than anyone. It will cause far more as it does further stupid things. But it's not about the dollar. It's about fiat currencies against real items of value. They are all falling apart. On a trade-weighted index right now, the average currency is in an all-time low. The Fragile Five, all at all-time lows. The BRICS, all at all-time lows, except China, which will eventually devalue completely and go to an all-time low as well. So it's nothing to do with whether the dollar falls. The dollar's not going to collapse against what? Against the euro? The euro may not even be here a year or two from now. The yen? Japan may not even be here in a few years because of their demographic issues. The dollar index is not going to collapse. There's no currency in the world that's going to get stronger. The only thing that's going to get stronger is real money, things that are actually worth something, such as gold and silver.
Yeah, that's right. And where I was going on that is that our friend out there in YouTube land, JSnip, did a video on Thursday just asking the question, what does gold and silver look like if you're a Brazilian? You know, we know what it looks like if you're Venezuelan. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And
Yes.
gold, when priced in Brazilian currency, is up over 300% in just a few years.
Okay, well, Jay Snip should defer to what A. Hoff has been talking about for many years. When I wrote a year ago, for instance, End of the Gold Bear Market, with, bear market in quotes, because it's not a bear market, it's just a manipulation. But the fact is, in all currencies, it's either at or near all-time highs. In fact, everyone should listen to my audio blog where I talk about the fact that the South African, gold and South African rand hit an all-time high. And this, the day before, where my article showed how the end of gold mining is going to start with the collapsing South African mining industry. Think about it. Collapsing South African gold mining industry, record high price in South African rand. That shows you how screwed up the fiat currency system is. And by the way, it's not just these third world countries like the Brazilian real and the Russian ruble, which are at all-time highs. I mean, Australian gold, right? You know, we're told all the time, oh, gold is just a commodity. It's going to crash with deflation. Oh, yeah? Well, take a look at the price of iron ore, of copper, of wheat, of oil in Australian dollars, and then take a look at the price of gold in Australian dollars. Just 10% below its all-time high. Even Canada, it's only 15% its all-time high. It's everywhere except the United States, where we have this ridiculous cartel that controls prices in the COMEX, despite there being no inventory and relentless demand. So again, around the world, we're in a bull market, an undisputed bull market. If you live in Australia, first world country, all that stuff, crashing economy, you're holding your gold now and going, ha ha, I was right all along. You're in America, if you don't understand what we're talking about right now, you go, oh my God, gold's down 40%, it's in a bear market. No, the only thing that's down is the paper price. We are seeing exploding demand, and forget it, in silver, we are so close. How much can we document what's going on in silver right now? There's almost no supply left. We don't even take orders from the Royal Canadian Mint right now. Silver Eagle, 6 to 8 week delay, and that's because they're allocating. I see they just raised the premiums again today. Junk silver you can't even find. The only thing we can find right now is they just started issuing the 2016 kangaroos from the Perth Mint, so we can get some. But pretty soon that'll be sold out too. There's nothing out there except these 100-ounce bars no one wants, and then those will be gone too. Again, it's not a bear market in gold and silver. It's a manipulated bear market in paper prices in the United States principally. And around the world, gold is soaring, and pretty soon silver will be soaring probably far faster than gold will.
Yeah, great rant, Andy. I mean, honestly, it's because of this type of information that people are still getting a chance to go and protect themselves, right? Because as we've discussed in past interviews, gold and silver are at artificially low prices for Americans who have dollars. That's not the way it is all over the rest of the world. So people have to understand what a gift they've been given by this criminal cartel, especially people who are new listeners and didn't have to buy above 30 and 40 only to ride it all the way back down. Of course, you measure your silver and gold in ounces, not price, because you know what's going on.
Right. And of course, it's easier said than done to measure in ounces when the ounces are worth less paper dollars at the moment. But the fact is, those ounces are becoming more and more scarce no matter where you look. I mean, there's no objective measure you can find that doesn't show supplies plummeting, production plummeting, and demand soaring. We're just getting started. 2015 will unequivocally break all records for global demand for gold and silver. And the record before that was probably 2014. In 2015, I don't know if we'll be able to get there because I don't think there'll be enough supply for the demand that will be there.
Yeah.
And in some of these other countries, people are trapped. I mean, for instance, we're talking about all these countries like Brazil where the price is at a record level. The problem is you can't get any in Brazil. Mm-hmm. They don't have a developed retail system like we do here. So you can't protect yourself there. Just like here, people have the opportunity still, to a lesser extent, but they don't want to do it. And that's what markets do to people, especially manipulated ones. And, it causes the most amount of people to lose the most amount of money. But those who are smart enough to listen to stations like this, to read the Miles Franklin blog, to do their own due diligence to what's going on to the world, like, for instance, looking at the Baltic Dry Index, looking at the Caterpillar's earnings and realizing that things are really falling apart fast, particularly in the monetary area. I mean, currencies collapsing and central banks futilely trying to pursue ridiculous strategies that aren't working. I mean, you are the few people that have the chance to protect yourself and get yourself through what are going to be some very, very difficult times, as difficult as we've seen in this planet for decades, if not generations.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I interviewed my friend Harley Schlanger the other day from LaRouche, and he's such a great guy, a historian, such a brilliant guy, and he's a very conservative guy. And we don't really talk, he and I, about precious metals very much. We talk about geopolitical issues, and he said people are going to lose everything because he knows what's coming. He understands what you and I are talking about. And as far as measuring wealth in ounces, I want to share this story with you, with everybody. I do the same thing, right? I've got this beautiful 9-year-old son who I absolutely adore, and I had a silver delivery come the other day, and I was showing him some of the silver, and he was just enamored by the coins and wanted to hold each one, not understanding that each one is an ounce and each one is worth roughly the same amount of money. He kept asking me, how much is this one worth? Well, how much is this one worth? And I told him, well, you know, roughly $20 right now, and he thought that was shockingly low, and I said, but really, son, in the future, I think each one of these is going to be worth at least $600. And his eyes lit up, and he ran across the room with one of the coins to show his sister. These are going to be worth $600. And I'm citing John Williams from Shadow Stats, who says, Andy, the 1980 inflation-adjusted all-time high in silver right now, because of all the Fed money printing, all the malfeasance, all the nonsense, is $601 an ounce.
Right, and the numbers that I gave years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, which are based on the same, you simply take the amount of dollars that are supposedly out there and the amount of gold that's supposedly in reserve, and we know, of course, that there's far more dollars than they say, and we know there's far less gold than that's in reserve, and that gives you $15,000 to $20,000 an ounce of gold now, or it did a few years ago. It's more now, and like 1,000 to 4,000 for silver, which would be whatever ratio, 5 to 1, 15 to 1. You can pick whatever you want. These are just simple mathematical numbers. When it comes down to it, gold is going to be seen as real money, and silver, and people are going to buy it. They're going to be priceless as opposed to dollars that are eventually going to be worthless, or somewhere in between as we get to those end games. So, of course, they're going to be worth $600. Because everyone's going to want them and no one's going to sell them. It's that simple. And we're at that point right now where we at Miles Franklin have so much demand that we can't find supply. I mean, that's when the price goes parabolic. And this is just as this whole currency crisis, commodity crisis is really starting to get going. And I've said all along that barring a black swan event, and there's plenty of them, like, for instance, this Volkswagen thing, could do it by themselves, or this weekend the Catalonian elections could do it by themselves. But barring that, when Janet Yellen finally gives in overtly and says, "Yep, I was wrong, we're doing QE4," then I think you have lost all credibility of all central banks everywhere, and then the run for whatever metal is left is going to be off the charts.
Yeah, you mentioned the word priceless, and I was thinking the same word as you were speaking there, nodding my head, because in a hyperinflationary situation, which is sure to come eventually, the metal will be priceless because there will be a flood of fiat dollars that are worthless, and people will want tangible assets. For instance, I don't want to trade one ounce of silver for a $2 trillion Zimbabwe note, because a $2 trillion Zimbabwe note won't buy you a loaf of bread. So I think everybody gets the idea there. So before we let you go, Andy, let's just talk about another seminal event. We know that General Motors was caught and fined a ton of money for doing something which led to the deaths of people that bought their cars with this ignition switch problem. They knew there was a problem, they didn't fix it, and people died. Now we see another motors maker, auto manufacturer, in deep heat with Volkswagen. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and why you think it's so damn important?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, Government Motors is probably the worst run company on the planet, and what they did was terrible. But I think Volkswagen, which maybe is one of the top 5 companies in all of Germany, and as I read today, they had 270,000 employees in Germany alone, and a lot more if you include the people they have at the auto parts. I mean, that's how big they are. And what they committed, the fraud that they just committed, we learned earlier this week on the United States, we learned this morning on Europe and probably the whole world, is as big of a corporate scandal as I've ever seen in my entire life. Blown away, Enron, WorldCom, all these things. And basically what they did was there, and obviously you can't even try to do one of these, well, we're going to pin it on the engineers. No, this was a corporate decision to install very delicate software into all of their cars, their diesel cars, that fool emissions testing machines. In other words, to beat the U.S. emission standards, the cars are made to be able to sense when an emission testing machine is on. And when they do, it goes into a test program which lowers the emissions. But on the road, it turns out they have 10 to 40 times the legal limit. And the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency called them on that this week, and they admitted it. So they basically said we're cheaters and frauds. They admitted they did it in Europe too, which probably means they did it everywhere. So aside from losing their reputation and the fact that, by the way, they have an all-time high record level of inventory, which will probably all be recalled, and that they're due just for the United States alone, they could be up to $18 billion of fines, let alone what's going on in the rest of the world and the layoffs that are going to come and all that stuff. I mean, this is coming at a time where Europe is already falling apart, and Germany is supposedly the strongest company in Europe. This is an absolute black swan of epic proportions. It just came out. It's going to be horrifying in the ramifications of the global economy, of how governments think of themselves, about how all governments think of Europe and Germany. And remember, Germany's trying to hold together all of Europe. Absolutely cataclysmic. And you know what? It's par for the course. I actually wrote today that this is barely a notch different than JP Morgan admitting that it was suppressing gold and silver along. That's how much of an egregious break of trust with the world this giant, age-old trusted company has committed.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big one. Well, it really speaks to the corporatocracy and the problem that humanity's up against, Andy. These corporations only care about the bottom line, as you and I and many others have discussed before. They only care about profit. That's the corporate mandate. They don't care about human beings. Their marketing might suggest that they do, but the reality is the corporatocracy only cares about money, not human beings and not the planet.
And
And
the
that's
equal reality is, like the central bankers, they're just as clumsy and stupid about it, about everything they do. And that's why they get caught doing these incredibly dumb things. I mean, Volkswagen is toast as a mainstream brand for decades to come. Yeah, they'll still be around. Maybe. Maybe they don't have enough to cover all the losses that they're going to have from all the lawsuits and recalls and all that. But the fact is, they destroyed a corporate brand with greed, and greed that, frankly, wasn't too difficult to be caught.
Well, I wonder if the same thing was going on with any of the Audi vehicles, because of course VW owns Audi.
Isn't that funny you should say? Because BMW was also caught in this today. And what I said in my audio blog was, now that BMW's got caught, get ready, Mercedes and Audi, you're next. Because of course they're all doing it. Heck, I'll bet General Motors is doing it too. As if anyone were buying their cars in the first place instead of leasing them on or renting them on subprime loans.
Yeah. Well, it is a terrible fraud, but for me it pales against the backdrop of Fukushima and actual destruction of the planet, which appears to be going on and quickening, and nobody's doing a damn thing about it. And certainly China can do whatever it wants in terms of polluting the planet. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me, Andy. These corporations are evil. They're a blight on humanity. It's I think our number one problem. Corporations are our number one problem because corporations don't care about people. It's like I've been saying forever too. At this point in human history, it's humanity versus the banksters.
Well,
Right?
it's the 1% against the 99%, and frankly, it's less than 1%.
Way less.
But that 1% is not quote corporations. It's a team of corporations, governments, and central banks who are intimately engaged in the same process, of maintaining a status quo, which harms everyone else.
Right. Well, why don't we do this, Andy? Before we have to be talking about the dollar and the situation in the United States in the same way that we talk about Brazil and Venezuela and what happened in Zimbabwe and the Weimar Republic, before that happens, before we're having that conversation, why don't you tell people how they can take action to protect themselves?
Yes, again, Miles Franklin. We've been in business for 26 years without a complaint. A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Give us a call, 800-822-8080, or email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
All right. Andy Hoffman, thank you so much.
Very welcome.
Guys, thanks for listening and thanks for supporting us at sgtreport.com, thephaser.com, where I handpick videos and stories for you on a daily basis, and thelibertymill.com. Real news 24/7. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. Bye-bye.